Hello, welcome back to Dirty Boots Capital, guys. Today we have a special guest with us, Lieutenant Colonel, retired Sean Connelly. He brings with him a lot of good military experience, history. So we want to get his background there, but then also get some up-to-date information on what he's doing today with his new company that he established and trying to help people figure things out in this crazy world today. So, Sean, welcome to the program.
Hey, great to talk to you, Johnny.
Yeah, thanks. So you are located in Arizona.
Yep, out here in Phoenix area.
And tell us a little bit about your background in the military, what you did there and for how long you've been, how long you worked for the military and what made you leave.
Was with the military for about 26 years and started off with second lieutenant, who actually enlisted in college and joined for a while there, stuck around for a bit as an engineer officer. And then after 9/11, started volunteering and ended up deploying a bunch in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Central America, different places like that. And got out for a little while and then went back in after, saw a need later in 2008, 2009, and since then, I was deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan again, but also spent a lot of time doing the European Defense Initiative as a planner, strategic planner for that, as well as doing anti-terrorism, force protection, counter ID planning for those from operations from an engineer perspective.
Wow, so a lot of good experience there. You've been there for a while. What made you leave the military world there?
Well, my last assignment was the deputy commander for the USACE for the border wall mission. So we were building the border wall. And we worked to push hard through those 450 miles. I was going to stick around for another 5 years, but just saw the trends of the way the military is kind of focused on some political things that I didn't agree with, as well as just the mandates coming down. I didn't feel appropriate to enforce things that I didn't think are constitutional or ethical. And so I got to the point where my wife and I decided it was time to retire.
You basically got to the point where you exercised your freedom. So good for you. You did a lot of good things serving this country. So thank you for serving this country and, and helping people abroad who needed help. And these days we're seeing some crazy things happening in this country. So bring us up to speed as to what you're doing today with your new business.
So my business partner and I, Curtis Dietz, we started Five Stones Consulting. And what it is we basically our Five Stone Strategies company will take a look at your current situation, family, business, and we've helped develop contingency planning. So it's how do you mitigate any future risk that can be you have a movement from either family risk or business risk where you want to keep everything stable and as operational as possible, the least interruptions as possible with any sort of, whether it's financial disaster or natural disaster, that'll allow you to be prepared for that. So that's our planning strategy, is be able to help contingency and crisis management and planning.
So thank you for helping people with that, because seriously, once you start to look at these different things, it can become overwhelming pretty quickly and you don't know where to start. And so thanks for helping people with that. We're in a strange place right now where we have to be thinking of these things, right? As Americans, we always thought, hey, things can go awry in other countries. And we've seen it on the news and in the media and different sources, right? But, we see some of the craziness going on in this country. It's kind of scary with some of the riots, some of the, just different things that are going on. We've all seen it.
I think part of my background has really helped me. I mean, first I grew up in Louisiana, so we were a little unique down there with the hurricanes. We had some semblance of, hey, we need to have extra food, a little extra water stored, and we kind of knew that was a lot part of life growing up. And when I was with Hurricane Andrew that came through with my family, we were out of power for about a week and just had to deal with some natural situations that way. But also I was with the bodyguard for Fox News and the Ferguson riots, so kind of saw some stuff more locally. But Hurricane Katrina, being down there, I was with the Army for Hurricane Katrina, and that kind of opened my eyes to seeing how devastating things could be, because Katrina was a unique situation and one whole city was devastated, New Orleans and the surrounding areas. But it took all the resources of the United States to help support that one city. Yep. And so imagining 2, 3, 4 cities have some sort of collapse, then the United States would be overwhelmed to be able to support that and protect people.
Absolutely. Yeah. You talk about 3, 4, cities having some sort of disaster, right? Maybe a terrorist type incident or something. I mean, that's not something that's, unrealistic today with so many undocumented people coming across the border, the southern border. We're not sure the pedigree of those folks. Maybe some of them are good, decent people, right? I got to imagine some of those people that aren't being checked at the border, they want to get into this country to to do some damage. And going forward, we got to protect ourselves now. If the politicians aren't going to do it and close the border or protect us through some policies where they strengthen the migration policies and the checkpoints, we got to take it upon ourselves as citizens to protect ourselves, preparing ourselves to make sure we have enough water, make sure we have enough food, things like that. That's always been, one aspect of what we try to prepare for. I'm up in the Northeast, so we deal with, blizzards and snowstorms and ice storms that knock out power for potentially 2 weeks at a time. So we would have to prepare for that sort of stuff. But now we're starting to get into terrorist attack in Boston. I need to be able to prepare for that as well. Tell us a little bit about what do you help a family with put in place for sustainability versus what you help put in place for a business for their sustainability.
So kind of backtrack a little bit. Part of my perspective has become from, if you've been around the world and traveled much, you realize that the United States is an anomaly. I mean, even parts of Europe or particularly when I was in Pakistan or in Central America, anywhere, if you're in Asia, are a small upper class and a very large lower class. And there's very limited, if no, middle class whatsoever. And so you have the haves and the have-nots. And so when the have-nots start running out of food or other things like that, then you become in a situation where it's untenable. And, the haves, even those who have, are middle class, have compounds. They're more of, they have secured compounds with walls and security guards, and that's the middle class. I mean, that's not just the wealthy, because everybody they have to protect what little they have. With that same mindset, understanding that if we become more socialist in the United States and we become more dependent on government, and then when the government can't provide, all of a sudden you have this gap widens and people get in trouble. And so what we do particularly with companies or with people, is we look at first what you currently have, resources, particularly with families. And then we start helping you with your community, because your community is the biggest asset that you have, whether it's your family members, your local community, extended community, and understand how you can network with them and build a plan to self-sustain and self-support each other. As we're not individuals. You're not going to ever find anybody who's successfully goes and gets a bunker in the middle of nowhere and hides there for 50 years. I mean, it's not going to happen. We're social creatures, and none of us have the skill set or mindset to be able to take over all the things that we normally provide for ourselves today. It's a community effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the folks I've been chatting with about, putting together Plan Bs. Community is part of all of our Plan B, right? And to your point, one of the things I talk about is, sure, I have a garden in my backyard. We just doubled it this year to be able to add more vegetables, which is great. If I hurt myself and I don't want to go, say I cut myself, I don't want to go to the hospital for whatever reason, right? Maybe having somebody local in my community, right, my neighborhood, who's a medical professional who can help me, whether I get a sprain or a cut or something like that, somebody who can help me from that regard is important to me, right? And it's not just medical, there's other things, right? I'm not an expert farmer. That's not my background, not my trade. So maybe there's somebody else in the community who knows how to farm better than I do, right? And then we had the conversation about prescription drugs. Say for whatever reason we can't get our hands on prescription drugs, it's good to have a pharmacist. And I think you call them something different than just a pharmacist.
Yeah. So there's the old-fashioned pharmacy apothecate who can compound drugs, and there are a lot of there aren't a lot of them left, but there are some local, like in Phoenix. I think there's 2 of them, or maybe 3, where they actually have the formulas for the drugs and a lot of the materials on hand to be able to compound certain drugs. And so if you've got something that's life-sustaining, particularly somebody who has needs insulin, or needs some sort of other drug to stay alive, it's critical that you have alternate resources, because supply chains are breaking down pretty easy. And I mean, we see this with what's happening in Singapore right now. It's whether Singapore is intentional or not. I mean, the fact that they're doing the zero COVID thing is destroying the entire market of shipping and everything else. And it's definitely, it's very interesting. They're destroying people's private farms to protect against COVID, and they're killing their pets to protect against COVID. And it's very totalitarian in its nature, but it also affects us, because now all the shipping is being rerouted through Beijing, other places. So we haven't even seen the effects of that, but we will in a few months.
Yeah, actually, I think it was 2 days ago, I saw a map of the Shanghai area, and just the congestion with the shipping ports, right, of trying to get goods in and out of that area. Everything is just so screwed up, so backed up, that to your point, we haven't even felt the impact here yet, but we will. You have that perspective. You've been around the world in disaster type situations, and you've seen how different countries, how they live, how different classes live in those countries. And then you, in your own mind, you kind of relate it back to the good old US of A and say, well, we're kind of in this bubble over here. We've been living in this very nice world. If and when things change, things could get real interesting here, and we don't have communities set up or housing set up where we have gates like in other countries, because they've already seen those bad times, so they know they need to get those things in place. Bring that perspective with you to your new business that you've created and said, okay, these are certain things we need to set up. Tell us a little bit about what a business need to do to maintain its sustainability.
So from a military perspective, what we did is almost anywhere we worked, we would have what's called a COOP plan, which is a continuity of operations plan. And the continuity of operations plans basically says, break it down to your minimum. What do you minimum need to be able to sustain operations? With that, where the continuity of operations plan, you have what they call a COOP site, which is another location that you could go to and maintain your operations and maintain your business. So that's kind of what we do with a business. Is what we'll do is we'll walk through your business, say, okay, yes, you might have 150 employees and you might have 3 business sites within the local bit, let's say the Boston area or somewhere in that area. You have shipping lanes, you have other things, communications, you work with different companies. What's the minimum you need to do to sustain yourself? In the sense of all you want to make sure is you're not breaking down. Your financial chain isn't completely broken. You haven't lost all your money. You can still pay employees. You can still pay your vendors. You can still do the minimum you can. And so with that, you might break it down and say, a minimum to operate for about 6 weeks would be 25 employees and 3 computer systems. And broken down by different types. And then you pick a COOP site, which is maybe it's in the local area. If you have 3 or 4 offices, what's the least likely to be impacted, but not your main office. But other ones you do, especially if you're nationwide. If your main headquarters is in Boston, but you have an office in Minnesota, how with that office, secondary office, how would you set that up for if your vice president and other people had to move to there for at least a brief amount of time? How do you maintain operations? And that's the same thing we do with families, is how do you minimal amount of impact on your life and your livelihood if you have to move to another location or deal with some sort of contingency.
Switching to a different aspect, it's taken me a long time, and I don't know if this is just me because I'm slow with the uptick in terms of getting things in place, or I don't know, maybe it just naturally takes this long to get things in place. I've been building up with some level of sustainability for at least the last year, if not more. And I've been doing it slowly. So you tell me what you've seen, what you put in place for people. I gotta imagine some of this stuff just takes time because, some of it also costs money, right? And,
Right.
I don't know about other people, but I'm not willing right now to throw all the money at the world at it. So I'm doing it in very small bite-sized pieces. Tell me a little bit about that, how you go about setting that up with some folks.
Like you said, we don't want to interrupt your life. This isn't, don't want anybody to be a prepper and go into their basement and unload all their food and ammo and hunker down. That's not about, this happens, it's not successful and it doesn't work. What we do, Lou, is we help prioritize. Now I think people should be prioritizing more than they probably have in the past decade towards this. But you have to prioritize and say, what is my, priority resources? Food, water, shelter are kind of your primary ones. Talking to other people, sustainability and barterability, skill sets, things like that. So you want to start with the basics and just figure out what your inventory of what you have and what you need. I'll be honest with you. I think we're running out of time in the sense that I truly believe that World War III has already started. I think we're in the 4th turning. And we're in a period, if you look at World War II, a lot of people think of it starting in Europe and starting with Poland, the invasion of Poland by Germany, but really it started in Asia before that when Japan started moving throughout Central Asia. And that was, I think, in 1931 when they had their first attack. And so it actually ended up being slowly progressing and ended up being about 9-year war. And I think we're in a similar sense now where it started economically and it started, with other things. I believe, really back in 2019 or early 2020 is when we see, there's a number of reasons I believe, some of these things that have happened over the past few years have not been unintentional.
Yeah.
And so, and I think it just progressively will get worse until something breaks,
Yeah.
and it's either a Cold War or hot war, but most likely, something that's going to be big. So you have to be prepared. But so that being said, is if we have another 18 months, 2 years before things start really getting progressively worse, here's where you just prioritize what are your needs. And that's where, if you build the community and understand, I'm not going to tell you right now, if you're not a mechanic, to go out and try and become a mechanic overnight. You got guys who have done it for 30 years who can take baling wire and duct tape and keep a car running, and those are the type of guys you want to utilize. But then you can talk to them and say, okay, here's my 2 cars I have. I mean, let's say I've got a Toyota Tundra and a little minivan. What are the 4 parts that are most likely to break down and break over the next 2 years
Yeah.
or 3 years? And then those are the type of parts you buy and put them on the shelf.
No, that's a great perspective, because those are sort of the things I don't think about. I'm not going to say we don't think about, but I don't organically think about that stuff. I'm not a mechanic, right? I don't know how to, if my generator breaks, I don't know how to fix it for the most part, right? Beyond making sure it has oil and making sure the spark plug still works, right? Beyond that, I'm lost. So again, being able to have somebody like yourself to kind of talk through, have this conversation and say, hey, let's prioritize things. Make sure you have food, water, shelter, and you're prepared there. And if you're not, let's take the next 6 months to get you prepared, right? And then beyond that, let's see where some of the other holes are for the next level of preparedness, right? And let's take the next 6 months to get you where you need to be, right? So over a year long, endeavor, you're able to kind of fill some of those holes in your plan and be a little more secure. Because I agree with you on the fourth turning. And for viewers who aren't familiar with that term, there's a great book that was written back in, I think it was the early 90s, by Neil Howe and another co-author who since has passed away. Neil Howe does a great job explaining the fourth turning. It was written, like I said, many, many years ago, before any of this has even happened. And so it's been almost a prediction of what we're in today, what we're seeing today. I agree with you, Sean, that this has started, the turning started years ago. I would actually put it back as far as 2008, right? Because 2008, that is when Russia and China started building up their gold reserves in a massive way. So I would say China, Russia, they've been planning for this since 2008. And a lot of us have just been, because we're here in America, we have good times here, we're not under any, political oppression like other countries, or, have any major issues like other countries. We're kind of still in that bubble. But there will come a day when people look up and they say, oh my God, I'm unprepared. And the time to get prepared is now, right? Do it slowly, where it's not going to cost you a fortune all up front, and you can kind of get educated along the way, like on a year-long project.
Right. And one of the things we look at is from our company, we're project managers. So we're not technical experts on anything. Like I'm definitely not a technical expert on automotive vehicles or other things. But one of the things we learned, and the Army or the military has a saying that I've heard a few times. I think I forgot the name of the Marine Corps general who coined it, but rank amateurs talk strategy and professionals talk logistics. And logistics is what is key to whether it's long-term sustainability or survival, or even operational planning with your company. If you want to keep continuity of operation planning, keep things running, it's logistics. It's the beans, the bullets, the people. How do you keep those things running and functioning? China and Russia have been preparing for a war with the United States economically since 2008, and probably even before that. But they really got into this high gear, and that's why I think really, if you look at 2019, if you look at some of the things that were taking place and putting in fall of 2019, I think a lot of us missed it, but I think that's when the actual Cold War or aggressive financial war, however, other things, there are other certain things, might be biological stuff that came over. There's different things that have happened that could have been other intentional or intentional, but they were definitely used in a military aggressive posture to start trying to remove the world from the U.S. dependence on the U.S. currency and U.S. dollar. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's happening that people should look at as a threat. is if the dollar was no longer the world reserve currency, and I mean, it might not happen, might happen, but if it happened, almost overnight, the United States, would be in economic turmoil.
You're absolutely right. I study a lot of the macroeconomic currents out there today, and it's truly the unknown that we're all trying to figure out, and we're all trying to watch, and we're all trying to kind of plan for. Right? We're all trying to plan for the uncertainty out there, and yeah, and so that's why I bring you on my little YouTube channel here and try to educate as many people as I can to try to get the word out. And so I think you're a wealth of knowledge, and people should pull on you for more information. So what's the best way for people to reach you, get in touch with you, should they have any questions?
Yeah, the best way is just you can reach out to me. I'll pass on my email. It's smc89@protonmail.com, and that's my current email. And then, but we also have 5 Stone Strategies. The number 5stonestrategies.com is our website.
Perfect. We're going to add that down below so the viewers can see those links, and then we'll also put in the description of the video so folks can easily find you. So Sean, thank you so much for coming on today, sharing with us your background, your experience overseas, your experience with sustainability, all that. So thank you so much.
No problem. My pleasure.